and Jim Slater, the takeover tycoon and asset stripper who ran the notorious Slater Walker. What united all these men was a belief in decisive, reckless action. It was this, they believed, that had made Britain great, not moderate post-war governments.
Some people actually seek risk, and they put themselves at risk voluntarily. And I think this is a spirit that is to be admired. I think it's the spirit that built the prosperity that everybody in this country is enjoying today. Was created by adventurers, by merchant adventurers, by pirates, if you like Morgan and Drake.
Then, an event occurred in the Middle East which gave Stirling the chance to try and reassert Britain's power abroad, but in a new, different way. In September 1962, Egyptian troops invaded the Yemen. They went in to support a military coup against the ruling imam. The invasion terrified the West because President Nasser of Egypt was backed by the Soviet Union, and he now threatened the oil fields of Saudi Arabia.
We have our troops there. We minimize the number of our troops. It depends about the attitude of Saudi Arabia, because if we leave Yemen without agreement, they will try to return the imam back to Yemen. We'll stay there until we reach agreement with Saudi Arabia.
How long do you think this is going to be?
I don't know. We are ready to stay there for 10 years.
For the British, Nasser threatened far more than just oil. The Yemen overlooked the British base at Aden. It guarded British trading routes throughout the world, and right-wingers in the government feared that if the Egyptians, backed by the Soviets, attacked, they would paralyse Britain's economy. Their leader was Julian Amery.
The prosperity of our people rests really on oil of the Persian Gulf, the rubber and tin of Malaya, and the gold, copper, and precious metals of South and Central Africa. As long as we have access to these, as long as we can realize the investments we have there, as long as we can trade with this part of the world, we shall be prosperous. If the communists were to take them over, we would lose the lot. Governments like Colonel Nasser's in Egypt are just as dangerous.
David Stirling was a close friend of Julian Amery's, and together they were determined to find a way to stop Nasser. But Nasser had humiliated Britain once before at Suez, and they knew the British government would do nothing officially to stop him. They had neither the will nor the money. Stirling and Amery had dinner with the Foreign Secretary, Alec Douglas Hume, at White's Club in St James's. They proposed a plan. A group of ex-SAS men would mount an operation to fight the Egyptians, but they would do it privately.
In this particular time, we're talking about in the 60s, British governments had lost the will, in some ways, to engage in this sort of operation. There was a great need for stability. There was change taking place all around. Revolutions, coups, and we could do something which the British government no longer had the will to do, helping to get rid of a foreign power in the Yemen. So it was logical for private enterprise to pick up this particular challenge. And particularly as we felt it was very important for British national interests.
The British government agreed to the idea. Stirling would help to organise a private war in the Yemen, but they wouldn't have to pay for it, and no one would ever know they were involved. But Stirling's team now had to find the money for both men and weapons. In secret, a member of the team flew to Saudi Arabia. Stirling already knew Prince Faisal, the most powerful of the king's sons. Faisal was terrified that Nasser would invade his country next, and agreed to the British idea. The Saudis would pay for the war.
Saudis saw David as a sort of their idea of a buccaneering Britain, an unusual who talked to them as if he was almost an Arab. Well, he didn't speak a word except for sort of localized Arabic. I don't think he knew any sort of pidgin Arabic. But he talked to them as they understood him and respected him.
The Saudis' use of Stirling was nothing but an expression of need. They needed his services. They didn't have anybody with his expertise. They didn't have anybody of his stature and ability. That is very, very simple. In his case, I think to say that he was a mercenary is to sell him short. He was a mercenary, and simultaneously he was an extension of British policy. He wasn't doing anything illegal. This government knew about it and approved it. And therefore he was sort of a merger between a mercenary and a Lawrence of Arabia, if you wish. You know, he brought these two things together, the romantic adventurer and the modern-day mercenary came together in the person of Stirling.
The Saudis agreed to pay for the British mercenaries and also to smuggle weapons into the Yemen. The man in charge of the weapons would be a young trader, Adnan Khashoggi. Khashoggi found the weapons that Stirling's team needed from Britain and America. Hundreds of rifles and machine guns left over from the Second World War.
They were not the type of arms they could get from their usual sources. They needed specialist arms of mountain warfare, guerrilla warfare, and things like that. That, of course, signaled the emergence of Khashoggi as an arms dealer. His first arms deal, Adnan Khashoggi, his first arms deal had to do with the war in Yemen.
The other problem was to find the men. Stirling set about tracking down his old comrades from the SAS, but who had now left the regiment.
He said, "You'll be leading a very small party and you will have professional soldiers with you," indicating that I was going to take professional SAS men in with me.
But this was not an SAS operation?
No.
What was it?
It was a international operation, supplying the Arab forces, training them, upsetting the Egyptians by mining their roads, ambushing, general nuisance. Mounted by governments who knew about it, but were not intimately connected at all stages.
So, if things went wrong?
If things went wrong, I'm afraid we would take the rap.
In 1964, an intrepid British aristocrat, Lord Kilbracken, made a film record of the British mercenaries' war in the Yemen. He travelled to the remote region where they were leading the royalist troops against the Egyptians.
The desert seemed endless. We saw only a barren, rocket-scarred mountainside, no tents, no houses, but up to 800 soldiers inhabit its caves and crannies. This is the Royalists' HQ. Here we met two of the British mercenaries. After morning drill, Bob and Co. would take their ease in the sun, outside the cave which housed their radio station and was their safest air raid shelter.
That photograph was taken at about 8,000 foot above sea level. One had to be disguised, otherwise the information would get back and the Egyptians would come and bomb you. Parts of out and out war, mortaring and shooting up of their convoys. The capital was completely cut off from Hodeida, their supply route from the sea. And we kept the Egyptians really tied down, and at one stage were completely running the country.
If the tribesmen were properly led, which is always terribly difficult, and properly directed, then we, with a small force, we could achieve a great success against a conscript army who didn't really want to be in the Yemen in the first place. It was very exciting. It was very exciting because at one stage one actually thought one was changing the course of history. And I think one felt that we could create countries in a better image if they were tied to Britain. It probably an incredibly arrogant thing to say. But we just felt that we probably